Welcome to Midnight Pages, a place where timeless literature gently guides you to sleep at the end of your day. Tonight, we present one of Charles Dickens's most beloved works, A Tale of Two Cities, a powerful story of revolution, love, sacrifice, and redemption, set between the cities of Paris and London. This video has two parts. First, a brief introduction to the novel, followed by a 25-minute abridged narration of its key moments. Turn off the lights, find a comfortable position, and let Midnight Pages take you on a quiet journey through the night. A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. With these powerful words begins a tale of two cities, a story set between two cities, Paris and London, and a tale of three lives intertwined in love, sacrifice, and redemption. Their meeting seems like chance at first, but soon they are swept up in waves of revolution, revenge, and a choice that will echo across eternity. First, Lucy Manette. Raised in the shadow of loss, she grows into a woman of quiet strength. After years apart, she finds her father, once lost in the darkness of the Bastille, now broken, silent, and nearly erased by time. But through her love, he begins to piece his life back together. Lucy's presence is like light in the lives of others. Gentle but unwavering, she awakens the humanity long buried in those around her. Then, Charles Darnay. Born into a powerful aristocratic family in France, he turns his back on privilege and injustice, seeking a new life in England. He hides his past, but fate is never far behind. And finally, Sydney Carton, a disillusioned lawyer, numbed by drink and failure. He drifts through life without purpose or passion, until he meets Lucy. Through her, he glimpses what he could have been, a better man, a different life. But he knows the truth. He cannot stand beside her. So he watches from afar, holding within him a love too deep to speak. For a time, peace surrounds them. Lucy and Charles marry. Sydney lingers in the background, never asking, never hoping, but always watching, protecting in his own quiet way. But peace is fragile. The fire of revolution ignites in France. Long silenced rage explodes. The blood of nobles spills in the streets. Justice turns into vengeance, and all are swept into chaos. Charles is called back to France. There, his true identity is revealed. He is arrested as a traitor, and the guillotine awaits. Lucy does not give up. She fights for him, through despair, through tears, through the cold silence of hopelessness. And in that moment, Sydney Carton makes a choice. A man who believed himself worthless, who thought he could never do anything meaningful, finds within himself a courage no one could have foreseen. He takes Charles's place, walks to the scaffold, and as he faces death, he speaks the words that define his redemption. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. This is more than a story of revolution. It is a story of quiet love, of unspoken sacrifice, and of the light one soul can bring to another, even at the cost of everything. Now we begin this journey. Let us walk slowly and gently through an age of light and darkness with Lucy, Charles, and Sydney, and witness their story unfold. A Tale of Two Cities, Part 1. At midnight, an old carriage was struggling up a muddy hill somewhere between France and England. Its wheels sank deep into the dirt with each turn, and the horses grunted under the weight. Inside the coach, a man sat upright, holding a leather-bound envelope close to his chest, as though the paper it contained bore the weight of something far heavier. His name was Jarvis Lorry, a senior employee of Tellson's Bank. To most, he was simply a man of figures, of ledgers and accounts. But tonight, he was something more, a messenger of the past. He was on his way from London to Dover, bearing a letter that had crossed the sea from France. The contents were brief, just a single cryptic line, recalled to life. For Jarvis Lorry, these 3 words broke 18 years of silence. A man long presumed dead had been found alive, and now a daughter would learn that the father she thought lost forever had survived, though not untouched by time. At an inn in Dover, Lucy Manette waited. Young, graceful, and unknowingly brave, she had grown up believing her father died when she was a baby. Her heart trembled as Mr. Lorry told her the truth. He had been imprisoned for nearly 2 decades in the Bastille, forgotten by the world and almost by himself. He remembered only the darkness, his cell, and his hands, always, endlessly, making shoes. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. Could she truly meet a man she had never known and call him father? The next morning, they crossed the sea to France. Their destination, a worn building in the Saint-Antoine district of Paris, a place choked with poverty and tension, the air heavy with quiet unrest. There, in a cramped attic above a wine shop, they found him. Dr. Alexandre Manette, bent over a bench, hammer in hand, stitching together scraps of leather as though his life depended on it. His eyes were dull, his speech broken. He muttered only the words he had repeated for years. 105 North Tower. His prison cell, as if he had never left it. When Lucy approached, he did not recognize her. He saw only the golden hair and trembled. My wife, she had hair like yours, he whispered. But she did not falter. She gently took his hands, dirtied and calloused. I'm your daughter. I've come to take you home. Something flickered in his eyes, too faint to name, but unmistakably real. He wept, and in her arms, he fell into the first peaceful sleep he had known in years. They returned to London. There, in time, Dr. Manette slowly began to mend. Memories came in fragments. Sometimes he was lucid, sometimes lost. But Lucy never gave up. Her presence, gentle and steady, became his anchor to the present. Time passed. One day, in a courtroom, their lives would unexpectedly cross paths with a man named Charles Darnay, a Frenchman by birth, but one who had turned his back on nobility and privilege. He stood accused of treason, spying for France, but he was innocent. Lucy, testifying as a witness, spoke with compassion, and something in Charles's eyes changed when he looked at her. In the crowd, another man watched. Sydney Carton, a disheveled lawyer with sharp wit and a dull spirit. He had argued the case masterfully, saving Charles with a clever strategy. But when the trial ended, he returned to his wine bottle. His shoulders slumped. his life once again slipping into shadows. Later that evening, Charles visited the Manettes to offer thanks. Lucy welcomed him warmly, and her father, though fragile, spoke with cautious clarity. Charles seemed drawn to the peace of their home, a warmth he had not known in years. But Sydney Carton watched from a distance. He looked at Charles and saw a man who reminded him of everything he might have been. If only he had made different choices. He hated him for it, and yet he also envied him. That night, Charles raised a glass in Carton's honor. "You saved my life," he said simply. Sydney replied with a crooked smile. "Don't mention it. I had nothing better to do." As the evening faded, Carton walked home alone through the fog-covered streets of London. The moon hung low, and the gas lamps flickered in the wind. He paused at a bridge and stared at the dark water below. The reflection that stared back at him wasn't someone he admired. That night, Sydney Carton whispered into the darkness, "That man will one day have to face the truth. And when he does, that truth might consume them all." A Tale of Two Cities, Part 2. Time had passed. In London, Dr. Manette was slowly but surely recovering. His eyes, once hollow and uncertain, began to reflect the quiet confidence of a man slowly reclaiming his place in the world. By his side always was Lucy, his daughter, his anchor, his light. And into this calm had entered Charles Darnay, a gentle presence, a man of manners, sincerity, and silences. He visited often, bringing with him an air of thoughtfulness and mystery. He spoke with Dr. Manette of books and politics, and with Lucy of art, of life, of hope. But behind his eyes, Charles carried a secret. He was not merely a foreign tutor trying to start a new life. He was the heir to the Evermond estate, a name soaked in the blood and injustice of France's crumbling aristocracy. A name he had chosen to cast aside, like a worn cloak, in search of a future that belonged to his own making. Still, his past followed him, and it weighed more heavily each time he looked into Lucy's eyes. One evening, unable to carry the burden any longer, Charles asked Dr. Manette for permission to marry his daughter. "I love her," he said plainly, "but more than that, I revere her. She is everything I was not brave enough to believe I deserved." Dr. Manette stood silent for a long time. Then, finally, he nodded. "My daughter is precious beyond measure," he said softly. "But I believe you see that." Then, as if speaking to himself, he added, "Tell me your full story, who you really are, but not yet. Not until after the wedding." Charles agreed, and on the morning of his wedding, with trembling hands and an open heart, he stood beside Lucy and gave her his name. That night, Dr. Manette shut himself away in his study. He took out a hammer, some old leather, and began making shoes again, just as he had in prison. The sound of the hammer tapping into the silence was like the beating of a ghost's heart. He did not speak for days. Lucy watched with quiet terror, afraid that her father's mind had slipped again, not because of the wedding, but because of what he had learned about Charles. But in time, the spell passed. Dr. Manette returned to himself, tender, tired, but composed. And then, like a storm cloud rolling over distant hills, revolution struck France. The Bastille fell. The streets of Paris became rivers of fire and fury. The poor, once voiceless and forgotten, now roared with anger. The Evermonde name became a curse. Far from it all, in a quiet English village, Charles received a letter, a plea for help, from a former servant of his family, a man loyal not to the Evermondes, but to justice. He had been imprisoned for the mere crime of being associated with Charles's name. And so, Charles Darnay made a decision. He would return to France. He would not let another suffer in his place. He would not wear the silence of privilege while others paid the price. He would go into the very heart of the storm. He told no one, not even Lucy, until it was too late to be stopped. When he finally confessed, Lucy's eyes widened, her hands trembled, but her voice did not break. If you must go, go. But come back to me. That's all I ask. Promise me you will return. Charles kissed her hands, her forehead. He held her one last time. And then he left. Across the channel he sailed, into a land unrecognizable. France had become something else, something raw and blood-stained. Villagers stared at him with suspicion. Checkpoint after checkpoint questioned his name. And when they heard it, Evermonde, they did not hesitate. He was arrested, declared a threat to the Republic, thrown into La Force prison, where damp walls whispered the names of the condemned. Word reached London. Lucy collapsed. Dr. Manette, trembling, rose to his feet. I must go, he said. I know the prisons. I know the language. I must help him. And so father and daughter set sail for Paris. But they were not alone. In the quiet shadows of the harbor, Sydney Carton boarded the same ship. He said nothing. He simply followed, like a man walking toward a choice he hadn't yet made. In Paris, they were met by fire and fear. Every street bore the scent of smoke. Men shouted from atop wagons, preaching justice with bloodied hands. The guillotine was a permanent fixture in the square now. Steel, wood, and the cries of those waiting their turn. Lucy clutched her father's hand. She searched every face for hope, but found only hunger, for revenge. Dr. Manette moved with purpose, pleading, negotiating, begging. His old wounds made him a kind of martyr in the eyes of some. They remembered him, the shoemaker of the Bastille. It bought him time, but not certainty. Charles remained in prison. Every day, Lucy stood outside the gates of La Force. Sometimes a guard would nod at her. Sometimes she thought she heard his voice through the bars, but she never saw him. One evening, Sydney Carton came to her. He stood in silence for a long time before finally speaking. I've wasted so much of my life, he said. But not this moment. I can still be something. She didn't understand what he meant. Not then. But that night, as he stood at his window, staring into the dark Paris sky, he whispered, "That man will one day have to face the truth. And when he does, that truth might consume them all. A Tale of Two Cities, Part 3. Paris had become a city of terror. Executions carried out in the name of the revolution no longer served justice. They ruled by fear. Citizens lived in constant suspicion of one another, and the guillotine claimed fresh blood each day. No one questioned whether the condemned were truly guilty or simply bore the wrong name. Charles Darnay remained imprisoned at La Force. The cold walls, damp air, and relentless dread gnawed at his spirit. His face was drawn with fatigue and sorrow. Day by day, he endured by holding on to Lucy's image. The memory of her final glance, filled with trust and fear, echoing through his heart. Charles prayed that his existence would not become a burden to Lucy and their child, and that somehow he might return to them. Meanwhile, Dr. Manette had become a respected figure in Paris. His former imprisonment in the Bastille earned him the revolutionaries' trust. Though he was worn thin, nearly to the point of madness, he tirelessly attended court to advocate for Charles's innocence. Even when his eyes grew dim and his thoughts faltered, even when he barely recognized his own daughter, he pressed on. He has renounced his past. He has not betrayed France. He has rejected injustice. He chose a new life. But in the heat of revolution, reason was easily drowned. The courtroom bowed to the cries of the mob, and justice was swallowed by vengeance. Names became guilt, and evidence was no longer necessary. Lucy waited outside the prison each day, dressed in black, her eyes fixed on the iron doors. When a hand waved from a barred window, she convinced herself it was his, that he lived, yet day by day, hope wore thin. She never cried, but her silence was so deep, it resonated like a wail. Sydney Carton watched it all in silence. He did not speak to Lucy, but remained nearby, ever present. His gaze had changed. The usual sarcasm and aimlessness were replaced by a strange resolve and calm. Instead of nursing a drink, he now observed people, calculating quietly. One night, Carton wandered through Paris's back streets, putting together the final pieces of a plan. Using his legal knowledge, his eloquence, and, most importantly, the uncanny resemblance between himself and Charles, he prepared to make his final move. At last, Charles's trial began. The courtroom overflowed with bloodthirsty spectators. They did not seek truth. They sought death. The prosecutor emphasized Charles's lineage, declaring that his noble name was his crime. The crowd cheered at every accusation. Dr. Manette took the stand. His voice trembled as he explained how Charles had broken with the past and sought a new life. But the crowd's eyes were cold, their ears shut. Vengeance was their justice. The jury declared him guilty. The judge sentenced him to death. Lucy collapsed. Dr. Manette cried out in anguish. Every last fragment of hope shattered. That night, Carton moved silently. He contacted certain guards and acquaintances, setting his plan in motion. He had only one tool, the striking similarity between himself and Charles. He entered Charles's cell. Charles looked up in shock, but Carton spoke firmly. "There's no time. You must live. Take my place." Charles resisted, but Carton had already prepared everything. With a mild sedative, he put Charles to sleep, changed clothes with him, and arranged for his removal from the prison in a covered cart. As Charles was quietly wheeled to safety, Carton remained behind. In his cell, Carton sat quietly. The next day, he would climb the steps of the guillotine. Yet he was serene. He held Lucy's handkerchief in his palm. Her gentle touch, her smile, her voice, they filled his heart. The morning air near the guillotine was thick with fog. The crowd stood in blank silence. Blood and iron hung in the wind. Carton walked steadily, each step as graceful and measured as a final dance. When asked his name, he smiled and shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Today, I die under another man's name." Climbing the stairs, he imagined Lucy holding her child, Charles standing beside her, a future where his sacrifice would echo in whispered stories. It was enough. At the final moment, Carton stood tall. A cold breeze brushed his cheek as he whispered, "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done." His eyes closed. Time stopped, but his sacrifice was not forgotten. The space he left behind would be remembered in silence. His final choice, perhaps the most beautiful act a human being could make. A Tale of Two Cities, Part 4. After the storm of revolution had passed, Paris and London slowly found their way back to peace. Charles Darnay and Lucy Manette began a new life safely, and their child grew as a symbol of hope. But this peace did not come by chance. It was made possible by Sydney Carton's noble sacrifice. His courage and love were not just for one person. They carried a profound message about human dignity and salvation. Carton said, "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done." These words go beyond mere sacrifice. They awaken us to the true value of humanity and the meaning of life. Though the revolution brought immense suffering and chaos, within it shone the light of human solidarity, love, and sacrifice. Through this story, we learn how justice and revenge, forgiveness and redemption are intertwined. Above all, we hold on to the hope that a single person's small act of courage can change the world. Now, let us carry that hope in our hearts and strive to live with love and bravery in our own lives. Dear viewers, thank you sincerely for joining me on this long journey. I hope this story has made your night a little warmer and deeper. Good night.